Yeah, now I have to walk well. Hi. This is Rogoff.
Hello, that's Greg Mozgala.
Yes, so as you saw, I was born with cerebral palsy, which if you haven't heard is the sexiest of all the palsies. And for the first, the majority of my childhood, the first 12 years of my life, the medical community and I were like this. I was constantly going to doctors. I wore several different orthotics growing up. I went through a slew of different therapists, speech, occupational, physical therapists, of course. And I'm sure the field has changed a lot. But my experience growing up in the 80s and 90s was that I would go to them or they would come to me, and for an hour, they would always do the same battery of stretches over and over and over again. And there would be some relief, and my gait would change slightly, and then they would leave. And 15 minutes later, because of the neurological system of cerebral palsy, my brain would reset. So this reinforced the prognosis that I heard from my parents, which they had received from other medical professionals, that my cerebral palsy would not get any worse, but it would not get any better.
So choreographing for Greg, he was so limited in his patterns when I first met him, so rigid, and he had evolved through his compensations just a certain number of patterns. And if I would ask him to move 1 degree off of those patterns, he would fall down. So if I said, open your arms, he would fall down. If I said, look that way, he would fall down. So it was pretty obvious that I had invited him to dance with me. I'd overcome many obstacles before, but it was pretty clear that this was pretty much impossible to cast him in a 1-hour role as this faun on stage. So what we did was we said, let's do it. And we set aside the better part of a year to be intensively working to make Greg, before the performance, a dancer.
I think what was most radical and innovative about Tamar's approach was its seeming simplicity. Neither of us, when we started, had any academic knowledge of cerebral palsy. So we had to develop our own vocabulary based on Tamar's unique choreographic language, which she calls body scripting.
And we'll give you a little example, which you can all try yourself. So, like I would give him parts of the body. So I might say, I'm going to spring it on him, 1 inch behind the sternum. First part of the script. Second, the web between the fingers. The third is the relationship between the eye to the armpit. You can notice these are not anatomically very big concepts. They're actually places in the body. So we got sternum, we have web of the fingers, we have the space between the eye and the armpit, and then the back of the nails on the right hand to the skin of the thigh. It's good. Yes, the skin of the thigh. So very, very simply, what the places are, and later on, the nuance of quality in the movement. So let's see what he does. You can all do it. Sternum. Oh, you do it here. Okay. Well, we do it. Well, just think of sternum, web, eye to armpit, back of the nails to thigh. Go. I want to watch.
And so what?
You just.
I've done it like half a dozen times.
Well, did you do it differently every time? Because
sure. Okay. I mean, well, that's the part. Well, we'll get to this, but that's part of it. I mean, each time allows for difference and nuance, which is pretty incredible. And so, what again? This was our word, but what this served to do was we use the term declunking. So, what this served to do was declunk my body. Since I didn't have knowledge of my body's individual parts or agency over those individual parts outside of my very rigid patterns, I basically moved through life, falling through space in one piece. So as once I knew a place, I could feel a place beyond the tension, and then utilize that place into the art and into my everyday life. And what was different, the paradigm shift from working with Tamar to my experience with traditional PT, was that when we worked together in studio and when we left, the work didn't end there. She gave me very simple, practical directions that I could use outside of the studio. She listed that whole litany of symptoms in my alignment. Sternum up, ribcage extended, tightness in the hip flexors and whatnot. And the first directions she ever gave me were, my sternum was popped up. Imagine you have an arrow going up. Take your hand, put it on your sternum. Imagine that arrow going down. Just do that. Sternum down, sternum down. If the rib cage is totally splayed, take your hands, close your front ribs, open your back ribs. And then take your hand and drop your tailbone. What that did, just very simple, boom, boom, boom. And I could, that's it, just sort of give my body directions to counter the CP alignment into a more positive, natural, organic alignment. And I did this all the time. It became a sort of new working model for me. And I was so used to people looking at me anyway, it didn't matter that I was like walking down the street doing this sort of thing. But I think that was a key essential difference.
Yeah, so awareness was the major thing, and investigation. So there was this constant, very active principle in our work, where he started to gain jurisdiction over his own body. He started to be the expert on his body. And of course, we were trying to body, try to understand the difference in each other's nervous systems. So we were doing this outside of the medical model entirely, outside of any kind of dance or choreography kind of model. We were outside the box completely. We had no insurance to worry about, no paperwork. We had an enormous amount of time. I'd been given a Guggenheim grant to do what I wanted to do, not specifically this, but I used this. And so it was like the gift of total indulgence in this exploration, which is really a gift in life. And so it gave us a chance to really push, and I wouldn't say take risks, because I always felt I was keeping him safe, but we did things, innovative things. We tried things. Like we did something called shaking, which a teacher of mine who'd been a ballet dancer who had gotten polio had gone to, I think it was Native American healers, and she had come across this approach called shaking, which we call shaking, and you can talk about that.
Sure. It was shaking is essentially a release technique that Tamar has been using for decades now with this class and that she runs. But when she asked me to try it, she just had me lay down in constructive rest and do a very simple voluntary activity like open and close my arms or open and close my legs. And essentially what was happening she wanted to get to was the fatiguing of those major muscle groups, or those muscle groups that were always working all the time, and creating a sort of a urgency in the body so that these underused muscles would come in and assist. What that did for me was resulted in a lot of sort of, it was a very big, sort of almost violent exercise.
Involuntary.
Right. There you go. Thank you. Sorry. That voluntary motion suddenly became involuntary. My body was moving in ways that I didn't think were possible for 30 years. That was pretty incredible. Not only was it a tension release, which is cataclysmic in itself, but the shaking in combination with this movement stripping allowed more access to my body and allowed my body to be more available to take these directions, again, to apply to the art and to my everyday life.
Right. It's, his status quo moved. What came into the studio was probably more than I bargained for sure. There was a lot of fear, a lot of pain. There were issues that I never imagined about proximity, about touch, things that he later, dancing in this production, he would have to partner really professional dancers. He's going to need balance. He's going to be able to be comfortable with touch. Not only that, but the nuance of bringing emotion through your movement. It's not just utilitarian what we were doing. We were trying to look for a span of expression through the body. So this was really taking a lot. And we did go to doctors, you saw every once in a while, just to check in to see, you know, is there a piece of understanding or a piece of something in the medical world that would help. And then we'd come back and that would be added to the mix. But basically we saw the body, my body, his body, as the resource for the knowledge. That the fact that the body holds a lot of information, and if you really can tune in and have this beautiful amount of time, that the body would tell us something. And then the artistic, you know, side of it, and the fact that we had all this time, but there was a performance a year down the road, which, you know, a contract, and, you know, that's what we didn't have for a while, but then we had that in front of us. But it was great because it did push us into more than the utilitarian kind of use of the body. And so we were inspired. And the thing that we realized, because we were not working academically, was that we were really proving neuroplasticity. I mean, Greg was changing so fast. I mean, one would have to admit that there were, you know, sort of identity crises along the way too. That was part of it. It was such a mind-body, such a holistic kind of experience.
And I think what Tamar did is what any great choreographer does, is she moves, or they move their dancers past their perceived physical and emotional thresholds to a new awareness and agency of their body, and then ask them to communicate that vibrantly. And so we have this documentary that is just finished post-production, and as part of an outreach for the film, we've assembled together a group of half dozen other people with cerebral palsy. This is sort of our beta group. We're calling them the cerebral posse. And we meet once a month to talk about issues that we face, commonalities, what things are just Greg, and what things are sort of universal for all people with cerebral palsy. And we're also working to empower these people to engage members of the medical community and have these types of conversations.
There's one, just to interrupt you, there's one really amazing thing when you get in a room with 8 people with cerebral palsy. A lot of them have never been in a room with anybody else with cerebral palsy. That's what they tell me. I mean, I'm sure.
Or never that many.
Not that many, and they've never had any wish to do that either because they don't. But there's something in the first 5 minutes of meeting us, talking a little about this, that really changes things for them. So I don't know that I can say what that thing is, but it's something that we did that we're still we're still working, Greg and I. And so Greg has a student of his own that he's working with, so that he is learning. He's working with somebody who has the same nervous system as he does, which puts them at an advantage. He doesn't have all the years that I had. I'm also a doctor's daughter. I was around medicine a lot, you know, and I was thinking during Mary's talk that dancers know the body the way nurses know the patients. You know, dancers, this is a resource. And there's not that much for dancers to do. They're underutilized. If they're not in someone's company, there are things that they can do. And I know there's dance therapy, but none of this was therapeutic. This was through an art form. So it's something that now we're looking towards, and towards all of you, to see if something in this, because the results were quite clear, but if something in this could be helpful and could advance something in the way that you might work.
Right. How can we continue to engage, and how can this work possibly be a benefit to the artistic, disability, and medical communities? And as we continue, we'd love to keep you guys posted.
Thanks.
Thank you.